You're standing in the middle of the ocean. No coastline in sight. No compass. No GPS. Just water in every direction, all the way to the horizon. And somehow, the person next to you knows exactly which way home is. Not a guess. Not a hope. Knows. This isn't a superpower. This is Tuesday for a Polynesian navigator in 1000 AD, and what they were doing with nothing but their own senses should honestly break your brain a little. Because here's the thing modern people never think about. For roughly 99% of human history, there were no maps, no paper, no ink, no satellites blinking overhead. And yet humans crossed entire oceans, walked across entire continents, and found their way home from hunting trips hundreds of miles from camp. So how did they actually do it? The answer isn't one trick. It's an entire sensory system we've almost completely lost. Let's start with the stars, because the stars are where this story really begins. Long before anyone wrote anything down, humans were tracking the sky with obsessive precision. Archaeologists have found evidence that Ice Age hunter-gatherers in Europe, roughly 17,000 years ago, were already marking lunar cycles on bone fragments, essentially primitive calendars carved by firelight. If you're tracking the moon that carefully, you're already halfway to using the stars for direction, and the Polynesians took this further than almost anyone else on Earth. Starting around 1500 BC and continuing for thousands of years, Pacific Islander navigators crossed distances of open ocean that dwarf anything European sailors attempted until centuries later. We're talking 2,000 miles of nothing but water, done deliberately, done repeatedly, done without a single instrument. Their method was called wayfinding, and it wasn't guesswork. It was a complete mental model of the sky. Navigators memorized what's called a star compass, up to 32 points on the horizon, each one marked by a specific star or constellation rising or setting at that exact position. As one star climbed too high in the sky to judge accurately, they'd switch to tracking the next star in that same rising point. It was a relay race across the entire night sky, and a master navigator held the whole sequence in memory. Not written down. Memorized. Sometimes over 1,000 stars, each one tied to a specific bearing. But stars only work at night, and oceans don't stop moving when the sun comes up. So Pacific navigators developed something even stranger. They learned to read the ocean itself. Swells. Not the choppy surface waves you see near shore, but deep, consistent swells generated by distant weather systems, sometimes storms thousands of miles away. These swells travel in predictable directions and hold their pattern for enormous distances. A trained navigator could lie down in the hull of a canoe and feel the rhythm of the swell through the wood, distinguishing the dominant swell from smaller crossing patterns, essentially reading the ocean like braille. Modern researchers have documented that master navigators from the Marshall Islands even built stick charts, physical models made from palm ribs and shells, mapping out swell patterns around island chains. These weren't used at sea. They were memorization tools, studied on land until the pattern was burned into the navigator's mind completely. And it wasn't just water and stars. Birds mattered too. Certain seabirds, like the naughty tern, fly out to fish each morning and return to land each evening, meaning their flight direction at dawn and dusk pointed straight toward the nearest island, sometimes an island still below the horizon, invisible to the human eye. Navigators would release birds from their canoes and watch which way they flew. Cloud formations mattered as well, because clouds often cluster and take on a greenish tint above lagoons, reflecting the shallow water beneath them, visible from miles before land itself appeared. Now let's move off the ocean, because land-based navigation was its own entirely different science, and arguably even older. Aboriginal Australians developed something researchers now call songlines, oral maps encoded directly into music and story, passed down for what current estimates place at over 40,000 years, making it possibly the oldest continuously used navigation system on the planet. A songline was a chain of lyrics describing landmarks in sequence, this ridge, then that waterhole, then this rock formation shaped like an ancestor spirit. Walking the physical path and singing the song were the same act. If you knew the song, you knew the route, and you knew it across distances of hundreds of miles through featureless desert. Some songlines even crossed language boundaries entirely, meaning travelers could follow the melody and rhythm through territories where they didn't speak the local language. Because the song itself carried the geography. The Inuit, living in the Arctic, faced a different problem entirely, an environment where the landscape is often just white in every direction, where landmarks get buried under snow for months at a time. Their solution was encoded, stone markers built by hand, stacked into deliberate shapes that stood out against flat terrain. But beyond that, Inuit hunters developed an intimate knowledge of wind, specifically how prevailing winds sculpt snow into consistent ridges, called sastrugi. An experienced hunter could read the direction of these snow ridges the way you'd read a street sign, even in a whiteout, even hundreds of miles from anything resembling a landmark. And this is where something interesting shows up across nearly every one of these cultures independently. None of them were relying on a single method. They were layering multiple senses simultaneously: sun position, wind direction, animal behavior, water patterns, memorized landmarks, and something scientists are still trying to fully explain, an internal sense of direction that modern humans have almost entirely lost the ability to access. In 2018, a study published in the journal Topics in Cognitive Science found something remarkable while researching Indigenous Australian language and cognition. Certain Aboriginal communities don't use words like left and right at all. Instead, their entire language is built around cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, applied constantly, even to describe something as small as an ant on someone's leg. Researchers found that speakers of these languages maintain constant subconscious awareness of their orientation, essentially never losing track of which way is north, even indoors, even in unfamiliar buildings, even when spun around and disoriented deliberately as part of the test. Their brains had built an entirely different relationship with space, one shaped from childhood by language itself. This raises an uncomfortable question. Is this ability innate to all humans, buried under generations of maps and GPS, or is it something you actually have to build, the way you build a muscle? Neuroscientists increasingly believe it's the second one. In 2020, researchers at University College London published findings showing that heavy reliance on GPS navigation correlates with reduced activity in the hippocampus, the brain region responsible for spatial memory and, notably, also deeply involved in general memory formation. The more we outsource direction to a device, the less our brain builds and reinforces the internal map it's fully capable of constructing. Which means the ancient navigators weren't operating with different brains than ours. They were operating with the same brain, just trained relentlessly from childhood in a skill most of us never develop at all. A Polynesian wayfinder wasn't born knowing 1,000 star positions. He spent decades under a master navigator, memorizing, testing, correcting, failing, and trying again, often starting training as a small child. And that's really the core of it. Ancient humans didn't navigate without maps because they had some mystical extra sense modern humans lack. They navigated without maps because the entire world around them was the map, if you knew how to read it. The stars were coordinates. The swells were instructions. The wind-carved snow was a signpost. The songs were literal directions set to melody so they could be memorized and passed down without a single written word. We didn't lose a superpower. We just stopped needing it, and stopped training it, and eventually forgot it had ever been there at all. The next time you type an address into your phone and follow a blue line without thinking, remember that somewhere in your skull is the same hardware that once let a person lie in the bottom of a canoe in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, close their eyes, feel the rhythm of the water through the wood, and know, with total certainty, exactly which way home was.